Hey everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us. I'm Connor Evans, VP of Growth over at DBSync, and today we're going to talk about something that sounds simple, but quietly creates a lot of delivery risk in Microsoft Dynamics projects, and that's integration versus replication. Now, as Dynamics partners, you're usually solving for two fundamentally different problems, but they tend to get bundled in with one word. And that's integration or syncing or even migration gets thrown around sometimes. So today, what we're going to do is separate those clearly. And this session's really architecture first. It's not tool first. It's not pitch first. Our goal is pretty simple. We're going to give you languages and patterns that you can immediately apply in client conversations and different scenarios.
And if we do this right, by the end of the session, you will start spotting where projects go wrong before they actually go wrong overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Harsh, why don't you take a second to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, so I'm Harsh Burlia. I've been working with DBSync for almost 3 years now and as a product manager. But yeah, that's a short and sweet description, I believe.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get into it.
So let's start maybe with what clients actually say, right? Sometimes it goes along the lines of we need integration, we need dashboards, we need reporting, we need automation, but those are not kind of the same request.
Yeah, it's a good point. So most clients that we talk to don't really distinguish between operational automation and analytical data movement. And those are two very different things. In their head, they're just going, okay, these things aren't connected, these applications, these databases. But as partners, you really inherit that ambiguity, and it's your job to take it and maneuver through it to mitigate that architectural risk. Because if you're taking on that client ambiguity, uh, you can build what they tell you to build and realize down the line that's not actually what they needed from a solutioning perspective.
Right. And so the first thing that we are trying to do today is kind of establishing a shared language across the board.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important things. I mean, regardless of us talking about data or integration and replication, shared language with your clients is a central theme to being a good partner. Now, when we're talking about integration and replication, a lot of the time those terms are getting mixed up. And what ends up happening as a result of that is the wrong tools used for the job, performance encounters bottlenecks, unexpected cost escalation happens, and really there's a long-term maintenance burden.
And the worst outcome, honestly, you become more like a custom middleware team. You're debugging something 6 months later down the line that was architecturally misclassified on the day one itself.
100% agree. Yeah, that architecture debt can be invisible at kickoff, but it becomes very visible 12 months later when things start breaking.
Yeah. So when we say integration, right, what we really mean is operational workflow automation, system to system, transactional, often close to real time. Now, think of it more like that, you have a lead on the CRM that converts into an opportunity, and then the sales team converts it into an invoice, which now goes over into your accounting system. Now, orders can sync between customer experience and e-commerce. And overall, what we see from an integration platform is as soon as a transaction gets created on the ERP side, once it's processed on the CRM end and it meets its sales cycle, we go ahead, bring back the transactional record number from the ERP back into the CRM or the source system itself, or any third party logistical system overall, along with updating the statuses of that particular record on the source system, so that both your teams, be it on the sales or the finance side, can work in silos, but also can work together at the same time operating in different systems overall.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Harsh, because when we're talking about integration, a lot of the times we're seeing bidirectional, tri-directional, quad directional. It depends on how many systems they're using, right? Whereas when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking replication, it's usually like source, target, one and done. But you need those bidirectional flows when we're talking integration, especially from that architecture standpoint, because you have to create those one-to-one relationships if you're doing updates down the line from, say, target system to source for the records after inception. So good theme that we're talking here with integration to remember is integration supports business processes. It keeps operations moving. And in that, latency becomes super important, right? You need those records to get to accounting quickly. You need those payment statuses to update into your CRM quickly. And scope really matters, right? What are we integrating? Because data completeness needs to be designed from the beginning. A lot of the times with integration, you might not need the full historical table. You might not need every single field on a given object. You need the right records at the right time. So, low code or no code integration tools can work really well in these scenarios, but in particular parameters. And what we see is scope needs to be clearly defined. Objects need to be limited, and transactional context needs to be very clear for all the stakeholders involved.
But this struggle overall, when you need a full historical sync, you need large scale analytics for your organization, or there is a large drift in the schema handling overall. And those kind of things are kind of very complex when you want to handle it via the integration tool.
Yeah, it's a good point because with integration, again, think operational. It's not intended or meant for these analytic use cases. It's not a data warehousing solution. So it's not built for that full data movement. And when you try and force it to be used for those scenarios, things end up breaking slowly as scale increases.
Right. So let's now maybe talk about our different product line, which is replication. Now, it's completely different from the integration that we were talking about. Replication is, think of replication as moving data at scale, right? You're able to do full table sync, you can do incremental syncs on it, moving data into a data warehouse or Fabric, or as well into Postgres or SQL overall.
Yeah, and when we're talking replication, the conversation shifts a lot to completeness. Customers tend to want replication when they're concerned with history, auditability, and scale. So think massive amounts of data, think compliance, think regulatory frameworks, and the latence tolerance gets a little bit different in those cases. For some organizations, they need that backup every hour, every day, every 2 weeks, or they need it every 15 minutes. It really depends on the use case. But in general, that latency tolerance is much longer in replication use cases because workflow is not the goal. Data availability is. Now, an easy way to think about this is replication moves the data, it preserves that history, and it enables analytics.
And on the integration front, it updates records, trigger actions, and runs the workflows.
Yeah, and distinguishing between the two of those, it really reduces a massive amount of the delivery risk. So if you separate those mentally, the architecture immediately improves.
Now, when you try using integration for analytics, right? This is kind of like, what we say, a recipe for disaster. You do not use an integration tool to build reporting pipelines. And if you do that, like the following example below tells you technically what happens, right? You might face API throttling issues. There would be missed deletes, Partial data sets can be one of them, and as well as a high maintenance overhead. It's kind of endless.
Yeah, and a lot of the times it doesn't necessarily explode immediately, but it degrades slowly as that scale increases, as the scope of data increases. And 6 months later, your BI team doesn't trust the data, and now you're in cleanup mode, which can be a full-time role for someone depending on the amount of data that is getting replicated. So the other mistake that we tend to see is using replication for more transactional style workflows. And when that's happening, you're going to get delayed updates. You're not going to be able to leverage things like event triggers. You're not going to have processes that maintain their integrity as you scale. You're going to end up breaking things.
Right, and replication engines are not meant to handle overall business logic, and they're not like business logic engines overall. They aren't meant to manage workflow state at the same time.
Right. And when you treat them that way, the friction tends to show up in the operations themselves.
So, talking about a very clean architecture pattern that we kind of tried framing within this presentation is the pattern is quite simple. You separate your operational and your analytical workloads. And this diagram kind of explains it very slowly, where the operational layer is handled by the integration tool and the analytical layer is handled by the replication tool itself.
Yeah, exactly. And that separation really it gives you different SLAs, it gives you different cost models and different ownership. So more importantly, you also get those cleaner contracts too. So the goal would not be to, custom build everything from scratch. That's a pain and it's going to lead to utilization misalignment on your resources. What really you want to do is, standardize workflow packages. We do that personally with templates, for example, for common use case scenarios like an order to cash cycle or procure to pay, right? Uh, then you also want to, standardize those replication pipelines. Do you have tooling that can ingest, say, all of the objects available in a Microsoft Dynamics org or a Business Central or a finance and operations and target any data warehouse, data lake, database, whether, on-premise or cloud hosted. And then that allows you to really reuse those architectural patterns and benefit from, the different workflows and pipelines that you've built out for previous clients.
Yeah, and when you productize, those margins improve, right? When everything is custom, your margins disappear without you even knowing about it, when you go down the line.
100%, right? So with that being said, when we're talking about monetizing integration, uh, integration can be packaged. So you can have fixed scope automation. An example of that would be, that order to cash cycle. We see it a lot, whether we're talking Salesforce and Business Central or Microsoft Dynamics and QuickBooks or Xero or Sage Intacct. And what we find is a lot of those standard out of the box objects in both of those systems get reused over and over and over again with respect to customer requests. 80% of the template that we use personally gets applied to virtually every customer that comes in with those requests. And what that's allowed us to do and our partners to do is really have that fixed scope automation. You can have those lead to cash vertical bundles. So let's say you're integrating Dynamics Field Service and an accounting software. You can get very niche and specific with the type of integration packages you offer based on those individual verticals. Might look different for manufacturing. It might look different for healthcare. It really just depends on, the industry, the use case, and what's being integrated from an application standpoint. And lastly, you can really leverage monitoring retainers. you now can own that customer relationship with their integration platform. And at this stage, you're now selling operational efficiency and not a one-time service engagement.
And the same kind of goes when we talk about the replication side of it, right? Where it opens a complete different revenue stream overall. You are able to sell analytics for the end user. You have fabric readiness services. You have compliance for data archiving, doing history tracking, data masking. And you also have a data ops retainer at the same on the same place where you have a integration retainer for the other side of it.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I'm personally most excited for partners in the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem. And the reason why is analytics budgets are usually entirely separate from ERP or CRM budgets. So if you can separate that architecture, you're unlocking a totally separate commercial conversation than you might have been used to having with your client. This now becomes incredibly strategic. So one thing we want to touch in on, and we're not going to turn this into a pitch, but architecturally, the patterns that we describe map really cleanly to the way that we've architected our product lines. One, we've got cloud workflow for integration. Two, we've got cloud replication for replication. And the key is not the product, it's really that architectural clarity. So the platform supports that separation, it doesn't blur it. And some partners, they really want to own delivery, and some prefer referral models, some prefer co-sell. We support all three, and if you're interested, reach out and we're happy to talk to you about them.
So the key is not the product, right? It's the architectural clarity that we are providing you. The platform supports this separation, but it doesn't blur it at any point of given time.
Right. And if you're gonna have one takeaway from today, in summary, integration equals workflow and replication equals analytics and scale. So when you mix those, that really increases delivery risk. Separating them increases your margin. And that's the whole thesis right there. So now we'd love to hear from you. If if you guys have any questions that you'd like us to answer, please feel free to reach out. I think there's a chat that allows you to drop questions in there as well. But we'd love to know in particular where this line feels blurry in your current projects.
And if you're mid-project right now and thinking we may have mixed these for you, or you might have mixed these already, that's completely normal. We come across this scenario day to day. We would be more than happy to talk you through it and understand how your business operates overall.
Absolutely. And most Dynamics projects, they don't struggle because of technology. They struggle because the two architectural problems were treated as one. And that is absolutely preventable. So again, I'm Connor Evans with DBSync. I'd love to invite you to have a conversation with myself, with Harsh, and talk through some of those problems that you're facing with designing projects around integration and replication in the Microsoft ecosystem. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.